This feels like deja vu. It feels like a coach who's being a little bit stubborn with the way that he wants his team to play. He's being stubborn with trying to change how a team is playing, and the results are hanging him out to dry. The results are not forthcoming, and the system is not working. That is what's happening with Cardoso right now. And the reason why I say it's deja vu is because, guys, we literally saw this with the guy who was coaching Golden Arrows, Manqoba, last season. Forcing to bring in a system, forcing to change how players play, forcing players into some uncomfortable positions, and the results are not forthcoming. So now, with all of the pressure that he's under right now, he's sitting in a place where I think at some point his ego is going to have to go, the insistence to do a certain thing is going to have to go, and he's just going to have to go back to what has been successful for him. In the Chiefs review, I spoke about as well this new positionless system that these coaches are adopting. And I feel like it's hurting a lot of the players that they are coaching, because you're putting players into very uncomfortable positions where they are not strong. So in Cardoso's system right now, it's 8 players that are being pushed into the box. So right back, left back, your 2 6s, your 2 8s, your front players are all being pushed forward. And they're all waiting for the ball to drop by them, right? They're all waiting for the ball. And what you're seeing with Sundowns, I always say, the best teams, you can tell them by the distances between the players. So this is maybe one of the first times where I've seen a Sundowns team where they trap a ball and there's no one close to them, even though there's 8 of them inside the box. And then on top of that, they do this rotating thing where you watch a Sales who's very good with the ball in the 10 area in terms of wanting to feed people. But you're watching him as a 6 because of the rotation, and he loses the ball over and over and over again, right? You're watching Mokwena pushing forward, but there's not really any cover for him. So every time there's a counter attack, something happens. In fact, I watched this Golden Arrows team and I was like, from minute 1, Dion is going to be a problem. And he's not going to be a problem because he's that great of a player. He's a good player, but not that great of a player. But it's because when he attacks, Umudiba akekho anymore because he's pushed up. Umudiba akekho anymore because he's pushed up. Now it's mano in the middle. And there's this thing in SA football, and I've seen it even in the Pirates games, where if you're a striker and you can just take a position in between the center backs, there's a thing that happens that when the ball is on the side, center back number 1, who's looking at the side, is unaware of what's happening right behind him. And center back number 2, who's got view of everything, instead of coming to close off this person, they're literally letting him run by himself. And what happens is when a ball is played in, this guy is out of the game. And this guy now has the upper hand because Untanga is behind him. And if you saw Junior de Jong's movement, he was making that diagonal run a lot, trying to get in through there. And Arrows was finding a lot of joy because, again, you're down to 2. And the positionless thing comes into it again because you need to be disciplined when you're playing positionless. Just because it's a rotating position doesn't mean that a position must be vacant. If Nyahamba, there must be somebody who's going to come into the space and close it. But now you see Mokwena's gone. Alenda's not defensively that guy. Even Sales, when he's back there, he loses the ball because there's so many people. Now you're facing a counter-attack, and that's what Golden Arrows did very well, counter-attacking from those places and playing that long ball into space and putting Cupido more specifically into trouble, because Cupido was a bit of that Cupido khoza centre-back pairing. I don't think it works. I think they're both nonchalant. My theory about centre-backs is that one must be a pit bull, one must be a director. It doesn't work when you've got 2 pit bulls, think Kaizer Chiefs, and it doesn't work when you've got 2 directors, think khoza and Cupido, because they're too relaxed, they're too laxed. They're too laxed. And every time in the past few games, they've been caught out quite a bit by 2 because they just take a little extra longer with the ball. a little extra longer with tending, a little extra longer with the pass. And because they don't have that support anymore, they're being shown out. I want to talk about Ushasha. I don't know if Shasha fits this team. I don't know if Shasha is the guy that plays in this team anymore, because now we're seeing the emergence of Reyners, the emergence of that quicker sometimes play of Sundowns, when they can switch it on just quickly and catch you off and go score, right? Ushasha doesn't have that in his locker, and he doesn't have the support usually of a Tash, who's now playing an 8-ish role, an 8-ish role. He doesn't have the support of a Sales, who's also playing an 8-ish, 6-ish role. So he's left kind of alone. And where Urshalile used to thrive with that, he just doesn't have that physicality, that one-man striker thing anymore. He was a force of will. He was a guy that could outmuscle and outthink and outrun your defenses when he's on, in order to buy time for everybody else to come in. So it's either they take him out or they rethink what he's meant to be. So I would have thought that at some point you'd see a front two, Yaga Mutiba, no Shasha, and you'd see balls being played in to take advantage of their physicality, or they're willing to become physical, right? But then you see him getting taken out. Mutiba comes in. Mutiba is not getting any service himself. Nothing is dropping for him in the box. Balls are not being played in. So he's coming in and not adding anything. It's this weird thing where Cardoso, his strength used to be his substitutions. It used to be he could mess up a starting line, but they'd assess what's happening. Second half, they change and they know where to go. Now it doesn't seem like he knows exactly where he wants to go in the second halves, especially when they're losing. Which brings me to, I guess, my final point for this. There's no hunger from this Sundowns team to want to go win. The hunger of the Sundowns team, and one of the strength of a Sundowns team, was that they would take each game seriously and each opponent seriously, and they wouldn't slack, they wouldn't sit back, they wouldn't do anything. Their planning would be on point for each team, number one. But then number two, there was a hunger. You know, Rulani, when the chips were down, he wasn't too proud to say, guys, Mendieta, you're coming on. We're crossing this ball. We're going to cross and cross and cross and cross and cross and cross and cross until something breaks, because that's usually what happens. You can't defend for the whole time. And if you look at a lot of PSL teams, when they do their low block defending, it's an unstructured low block. It's a low block where it's just numbers. They don't have a space. They don't have spatial awareness. And Sundowns could have maybe gotten something if they were a little bit more aggressive, because the spaces were there to be taken advantage of. But they were missing that thing, man. It felt like the goal was scored, then it just demoralized them. It got to a point where Libwana, they didn't want to push and get that final push. And like I said, Urulani would play that ball until Mendieta headed that ball and scored, or until a defender slipped. I remember, was it Richards Bay, where a defender slipped and they were able to score. Or versus Chiefs, when it's last minutes and they're just playing those balls in over and over and over again to try and get something from the game, especially if you have a Mutiba, like I said, and even a Shalil, if you could have them both there. But all in all, Reyners was missed, I think, and they must stop rotating. Guys, stop rotating. At some point, I thought, bring in an Obas, just let Obas sit and be able to screen that defense. Allow Debza to go if he needs to go. Sales. There was a point where Santos came onto the pitch, and Santos looked incredible in the middle. At some point, he looked like just the simplicity of how he was receiving the ball and playing it through, receiving the ball and playing it to somebody, playing progressively. I thought there was going to be a moment where him and Sales would come a little bit closer to each other, and because they both have that quality, they could release Elitaku or somebody else who was coming in, the Bennett Mokwena, a boy who was coming in, a Tashrik Matthews. You could play it in the middle and release the ball, because those two are able to find just that little bit of room, and maybe playing them together in sort of a double 10 would have made it possible to maybe either get Tebogo in the game to shoot, or play the balls through in for Abu Shalulile to get something from there. But nah, he looks good for 2 minutes. He's now on the wing. Ow. He looks good for 2 minutes. He's now a left defending 6. And you're like, but guys, can you give the players time to be confident where they are? Now, I think this situation, Cardoso, is going to be a lot like a situation Gawadu, where you have your own ideas, you have what you want to implement, but time is running out, and you're gonna maybe have to go back to what was working last season. RMR 433, Alenda Mokwena having set roles, Obas maybe having a set role, or Mokwena in the 6 with Adams, and Adams who's now lost. We don't know what Adams is meant to do, and I think it's because of this rotating. But with an Adams that plays with Alenda, who can help out with Mokwena, who can go forward and add numbers, who gives Alenda someone to pass to, they close down those spaces, complete a 1 meter, 2 meter pass instead of always having to look for 5 meter passes. Every time they were looking for 5 meter passes, Arrows was just waiting and intercepting those balls because of the spaces in between the guys. He's going to have to go back to that. And he's going to have to go back maybe to that identity of, guys, we transition. Today was not a low block game. Arrows was up and confident. And I want to give them credit because Nabo, they realized that, okay, stretch them a little bit, play the ball in, put them into trouble. From the moment when Williams had to come and uncomfortably sweep a keep, you could tell that, okay, Arrows was looking for that counter-attack and looking to exploit the spaces, left-hand side of Sundowns' defense. I would have loved to see Sibia on the pitch. If Sibia was on that pitch, that game would have been done. But I don't know what's happening. Anyway, he didn't make it onto the pitch. So kudos to them for doing that and coming in and having a plan and being positive. But them being positive meant that there were spaces. But Sundowns is so slow in the build-up because defender Magaltola, because everybody's standing so far away. And Khoza and Cupido are being exposed because of that. People are winning the ball back very high up, and it's been the past few games where people have been winning the ball very high up. It's just that, again, PSL and finishing. Even now, Golden Arrows, everything they were doing, they had to wait for a set play in order to win, which is another thing. Sundowns, set plays, crosses, corners, they struggle. If you want to beat Sundowns, I've said it again, Magesi settings, Chirambadare, Makubu, do that. And you'll get something from the games. But not to digress, Cardoso has a lot of questions to ask himself. And that technical team. Manqoba has a challenge. You can't just play well against Sundowns and then go and lose 4 games as they've done up to this point. You have to prepare like this for every single team. You have to be confident for every single team. And that is how we get a good league. Not beating Sundowns, then you're shawain tangazako. Not beating Sundowns and then we don't see what you're doing next time out. They need to find some sort of consistency, and that's what we need from these teams. If you can do it versus Sundowns, you could do it versus a lot of people. Guys, Sundowns, like I said for last season, calling knockout final was when they made the change with Manqoba. If Cardoso is not careful, if he doesn't change, the change will be put upon him and somebody else will come in. He needs to start getting results, and it's not time to have an ego. It's not time to be too proud. It's not time for you to be sticking to whatever laurels you have. You need wins right now, and it's tough to say that to a Sundowns team. But 1 loss is more than enough for Sundowns. Even Cardoso knows that. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Bye.